There's been a lot of chat in the Spurs fan base recently about what our best 11 is. Certain fans getting slightly frustrated about not seeing players played in their correct positions. Xavi Simons out on the left-hand side, Benson Paulinho in the double pivot, for example. But in this video, alongside Kish and alongside Seb, we are going to talk about what Tottenham's best 11 does look like in a four-at-the-back setup against teams that are likely to sit back against us. How can we do better at breaking those teams down and creating more chances? We've got a lot of games coming up in the near future against Arsenal, away, for example, where we're going to have to maybe sit back, soak up pressure a bit more. What does our optimal lineup look like in a game like that? What does our optimal lineup look like when everybody is back fit as well in both of those kind of game states? And we're also going to look ahead to next summer. And once we've kind of outlined what we think Tottenham's best 11 is under Thomas Frank, we're going to look at a couple of areas where maybe we can improve and upgrade that. So I'm with Kish, Lilywhite Lab, Seb on Football. We're going to get into it now. So I want to start off, Kish, by talking about the game that's kind of recently in my mind. Obviously, we're doing this off the back of the Leeds game, right? But one of the games where a lot of Spurs fans were frustrated most with the setup was probably Wolves at home, where we set up with Xavi Simons on the left-hand side, kind of in this little pocket. We set up with Lucas Bergvall in the number 10, and it was Paulinho and Bentancur in midfield with that back four. Well, I think Jed Spence played in that game. Spence played in that game, didn't he?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. But Doggy started on the left-hand side with Simons on the right. So this was kind of the setup that we went for in that game. And we did struggle to kind of gain control. We weren't maybe getting players in the right sort of areas. Paulinho and Bentancur kind of in that double pivot. Bentancur adding a little bit of stodge to that midfield when you feel like you need someone a little bit braver, deeper to kind of get on it and make things happen, especially against teams that are going to sit back and make it difficult. So what is the glaring thing for you in a game like Wolves when you look at that lineup that you think should change based off of the players that are currently available right now?
There's three players I would swap out of this team for currently. I would have Porro, a right back. I think the team lacks a passer from deep. We all know that.
I would say in that game against Wolves, I think, I don't know whether that was more of a rotational thing.
Yeah.
I do think Porro 100% should be playing.
No, I think Porro needs rest where we can rest him. I think the games I would rest him in are ones where they're going to be more transitional, or when the opposition is so poor that we can kind of get away with it. I think in any Premier League game against teams that are going to sit off, I think you need Porro. Not only for his kind of ability to break lines with his passing, but also when we are hopefully camped in the opposition half, trying to get a goal, he's good at creating things from half spaces. He can get round on the touchline and put really good crosses in. I think often when you play against sort of lower blocks, the onus becomes on the flanks because they congest up the middle and they leave the flanks open because they're obviously further away from goal. And that's where the quality in wide areas has to be key. And I think Porro is probably our best player at creating from wide areas. So I think you have to have Porro in the starting 11. The other two changes I would make would be personnel-wise. I wouldn't have, and this might be controversial, but I wouldn't have either Paulinho or Bentancur in games like this. I would have, I'd have Bergvall deeper with either Gray or Sarr, personally. I think there's certain games where we probably want to have Paulinho in there to be a bit more protective. I think those games are like your Aston Villas, your Newcastles, maybe away at like West Ham, where there's like a kind of edge to the game. I think at home to someone like Wolves, we should be taking the game to the opposition. And so I would want Bergvall's ability to receive off the back four, make things happen, carry the ball to progress it, but also he's got a good switch on him as well. And I think, again, in games against low blocks, the responsibility of midfielders to constantly switch play to move the opposition backline and manipulate that backline until gaps open up is key. So I think that's a big plus for having Bergvall. And I think the other thing as well is if it's Gray or Sarr, there's really good legs in there. So when their transitions are potentially happening, they can cover those spaces, but they also bring things on the ball as well. I think Sarr's carrying is really good. I think at times if you have Bergvall kind of sitting and dictating, you can also get Sarr late runs into the box, which I don't think we've seen that much of, but he's good at. And they're also big as well from set pieces. Not that Paulinho, Bentancur aren't, but I think those guys can hold their own in those circumstances as well. And then apart from that, obviously I'd have Simons in the 10. And then missing.
And we're looking at Odegaard on the left, do you think?
Yeah, I'd have Odegaard. To be honest, Odegaard or Tell in these kind of games. I think probably edging it towards Odegaard at the moment, just because of where he's at. But I also think Tell could become a real good kind of addition in these games with his kind of shooting from range. Only if Udogi's on the left, obviously, because I think you want someone to hold that width. But yeah, I think that would for me be our best team against those sorts of opposition.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree with that. I think Tell is obviously an interesting one for these kind of games because he's a player that is incredibly hungry to get shots off as well, which is something you need that almost moment of kind of magic sometimes to break down these teams. He's very good at kind of receiving the ball in the area there where you've kind of got Odegaard cutting inside, wanting to get a shot off, making things happen. I just think the dynamic that Odegaard and Udogie have kind of got, and the understanding they've got of each other, it seems like, especially from the Leeds game. And also having Simmons kind of out here floating as well, because you can have Odegaard drifting inside, Simmons kind of picking up these areas a little bit to move that kind of block around, manipulate them a little bit to create the space for the overloads out on the left-hand side. I think one thing in these sorts of games is Udogie is that more natural width holder, but I think you want to see his attacking decision-making and output improve a little bit more against teams like that. We saw a clip in training of him working on his clipped crosses, didn't we? Rather than just kind of smashing it low and hard across the box. And especially when he's kind of making maybe these kind of runs, because I think, again, with Odegaard holding that width for Doggy, kind of using that underlapping ability that he's got from his time working under Ange, there's so many times where a Doggy either making that run or going around the outside, he's getting to the byline in these kind of situations and maybe making the wrong decision. So I think if that's something that he can kind of sharpen up in terms of his crossing ability and also not hesitating to get the ball in, then I think we can become a really dangerous side with the quality and the sort of freedom that you give these two, Odegaard and Simmons on the left, to combine and kind of create havoc and create a bit of space for us to undo these kind of teams. But yeah, I'm with you. I think Sarr in these kind of games for that late box crashing ability, Bergvall kind of sitting that back deeper, switching the play from right to left. He's also got that ability to crash the box too. Seb, is there anything you kind of add to this? I think there's a few personnel, like Kish kind of touched on, that you could definitely switch out, but I think there's a few players that are 100% locks in that kind of setup for me.
Yeah, definitely. I think it becomes even more interesting when maybe Kulusevski's back fit in the new year. Obviously, how long it would take before he's back in that starting 11, not sure, but you could be looking at maybe Mohamed Kudus playing on the left, Kulusevski playing off that right-hand side, sort of drifting in field. But I really like that, and I really like that midfield as well. And I just don't understand why that midfield isn't the go-to against a team like a Wolves at home, because part of the reason why we struggled so much against Wolves was obviously because of Paulinho and Bentancur. And I think that sort of stopped us from gaining control and sustaining attacks properly. And I think if you had players like Sarr, players like Bergvall in there, we'd be able to sustain attacks so much better, which would stifle the threat that Wolves would be able to have. And I think even when you talk about defending transitions, I think Bergvall and Sarr would probably be almost just as effective as defending transitions, because of that energy, because of the legs in there that they've got, as Paulinho or Bentancur would be. Like, I think Paulinho obviously excels defensively in a lot of ways, but I think he's almost looks more settled when the game is in front of him a little bit, when he's sort of sitting deeper in front of that back four. I think that there's been a couple of times where the game's got a bit more stretched and players do run past him. He dives in a little bit too easy, and I don't think that Bergvall and Sarr are bad options at all, where you're looking at a really weak midfield in there. So that's what I want to see going forward, definitely in that midfield. And I think Simmons in the 10 is just a lock in these kind of games. Like, if we're starting anything other than Simmons in the 10 moving forward against a Wolves at home or against most teams at home, then I think there's issues there, definitely.
Okay, well, Kish, I want to come to you then, and we'll kind of stick on this sort of game situation and game state where we are playing against a Wolves at home or a Brentford at home or whoever, Burnley at home, for example, where we're going to be, the onus is on us to kind of go and break these teams down. If I highlight a few players here that are out injured at the moment, where you've got Maddison, Kulusevski, Solanke, Kolo Muani, how much does this kind of change for you? What areas are you looking at? How can we get Simmons... Is there a world where you can get Simmons, Kulusevski, Maddison, and Kudus into the same attack?
You can. I think you can get one more of them in. I would.
Yep.
It's difficult. I think I would. I'd move Simmons to the left.
Mm-hmm.
And I would see personally. I would probably have Maddison in the 10.
Yeah.
But that feels really harsh on Kulusevski. You don't know which version of Kulusevski you're going to get when he comes back.
Yeah,
that's the thing, isn't it?
I think Kulusevski could even play as an 8 in these games.
Yeah,
at
that's what I was going to
times.
say. Double pivot.
And then you probably could get away with that. I think Kulusevski's like, obviously he's physically very good. He's very good in duels. I think his defensive awareness necessarily isn't the best. Sometimes he loses runners, like they run off him behind him. But again, like these games, like you've seen the major teams do this, and like the Pep teams, for example, where they just have Rodri and then they have 5 attackers ahead of him. And those attackers
4-1, 4-1.
attackers like ours are. Like they're not kind of luxury players. Kulusevski works his socks off. Like there's so many players in that team. Kudus, Simmons. They all run a lot, and they're good duel winners as well. So I don't think it's like a massive concern.
It was like the Ange setup when he played Kulusevski and Madison in midfield. I know it's obviously largely different, but you could see how that works.
We didn't see that anywhere near enough because I think that was probably our best football we played. So yeah, and then obviously as a 9, I think Kolo Muani will become our best 9. I'm really sure on that. I think people are.
What skill set do you think he can bring in these kind of games? Do you think his ability to kind of snuff out chances in the box, his movement?
He's a nice blend between Solanke and Richarlison. I think he's got a lot of good link play where he can drop deep, but he's very good at getting shots off. Now his shots aren't always necessarily the cleanest, but he gets them off. And I don't think necessarily you always need the cleanest of shots. You just need to be able to get them off quickly. You see some of the best strikers in the world score goals where they scuff shots or deflect shots. But it's about being very quick with that trigger. And I think Kolo Muani, his goal to game ratio from January to the summer, I think was the best in Europe's top 5 leagues last season.
He scored 6 in his first 7 for you, though, didn't he? Some jokes. Some of the goals in there were jokes.
Sorry. So yeah, I think Spurs fans are in for a real surprise when he comes in. I think he's got so much you want to look for in a 9, and hopefully he can kick on in terms of translating that to. Do you think that games looks obviously very, very offensive, and so maybe that's where you bring in
Paulinho potentially? Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask you. So, like, I think that's interesting when you kind of think about the Man City 4-1-4-1 kind of setup and just have. You've got Foden kind of playing in the 8 or Bernardo Silva playing in the 8. You've got 2 wingers that are happy. Well, certainly one winger on one side that's happy to stretch the play, but then you've got a doggy kind of providing that balance in the attack with Simmons. I'd be really interested to see when Maddison comes back. Because also you could kind of have it like, if we go back to it more just on kind of paper, right? If you were to put Paulinho...
That's the back 3 one, but...
Oh, sorry, yeah. Let me go back one more. There we go. So I have Paulinho as kind of the holder, and then you've got where's Maddison? Kind of Maddison, Simmons. I can't take these guys out. Maddison, Simmons, and then Kulusevski, like all as one. You could also have it where, obviously, that's kind of the 4-1-4-1 kind of shape, but you could also very much have it where Paulinho is the sitter, and then you get Maddison a little bit deeper and kind of get Kulusevski as the 10. I think Maddison, especially with. I think there's something we spoke about in, was it your video, Kish, where we spoke about how Maddison's going to kind of respond and come back from injury with obviously the physical limitations that will probably be placed on him because of the ACL, to have him kind of deeper in a pivot where, yes, there will be twists and turns against teams that are kind of pressing high on us, but also like to have him kind of just sit back deeper
and spray passes.
Spray passes, dictate the game. Because also like Maddison is very left-hand sided bias as well. So I think what you could see definitely is kind of this sort of combination where Simmons is the one drifting in, allow Maddison to kind of play as that left-hand sided number 10. And if you think about when you're attacking kind of teams when they're sat in deeper, I'm not going to go back to the setup what we just had before, but imagine everyone else is kind of in the box and they're kind of cramped back. Maddison in these kind of positions, I think his crosses could be really dangerous as well. And I just think the intelligence of these two kind of put together to kind of create, combine and cause problems in those kind of areas, them switching between each other could be really, really
I think the key there is Udogie. Like Udogie stretches teams. And so having him there allows Maddison and Simmons to be more free. I think it's such a nice way of setting up where you see it with PSG as well, as they have some players who have real structure. You have your kind of Nuno Mendes, Hakimi, really big width holders. You have Vitinha sitting in that pivot, but then everyone around them is allowed to kind of rotate and be free, and you have like a freedom within a structure. You have those kind of players who can float and those players who are the anchors, and I think that's a massive kind of facet of a lot of the top teams now, where you have
Yeah.
certain players that are really strictly instructed to hold their position, to provide, the stretching of other teams, or that depth to allow for kind of recycling. And then you have players who can kind of problem solve themselves. And I think that's what we should be kind of aiming towards eventually,
Yeah.
like our final iteration of the team.
Yeah.
I really
agree.
like Pat Matasar in that Kulusevski role that you've got in there. I think he could be really effective with those sort of players around him, as somebody who wouldn't have any responsibility or as much responsibility in the build up when you've got Maddison, Simmons, Kudus, Porro, etc. around him, and somebody who can sort of really affect the game in the penalty area, sort of making those late runs into the box, striking the ball from outside the box as well. I quite like him in that area. Obviously, Maddison also isn't going to be fit until next season. I think with Kulusevski coming back in the new year, I think that's definitely an interesting conversation as to where you sort of fit him in with Mohamed Kudus. But all of those options are great. I mean, once we got all of our players back fit, that squad is so strong, like so strong, and there's going to be players that miss out.
Yeah, there's two kind of iterations of this conversation where we're looking about when everyone's back fit in the new year versus when everyone's kind of back next season, when everybody is actually back available. And we have got Maddison, but Kulusevski is obviously going to be back hopefully this side of Christmas, potentially just after Christmas. I think one final thing I want to talk about before we go and start talking about teams where we maybe have to sit off a little bit more, and the different versions of that. One thing, what you just said about Sarr there, but I want to speak about Kulusevski and Kudus down this right-hand side as well. We kind of spoke about the interchanging between Simmons and Maddison, if they were kind of to play Simmons as the left winger and Maddison as like a left 8 / number 10. I think Kulusevski and Kudus' ability to interchange position as well could be like just cause chaos for teams, because again, Kulusevski is comfortable receiving out wide and cutting inside. Kudus is much better at kind of going two ways, but Kudus is also really comfortable playing in the centre of the pitch as well. So to have them, like, it's very Man City-esque, like we were kind of saying before, just that kind of, like you said, Paulinho kind of the anchor in that midfield, and then everybody sort of floating around him. And I think what you've got really nicely in terms of personality in this team with these four players is you've got players that individually will take responsibility and make things happen, and they're all so intelligent as well. Like you can kind of, the amount of different sort of positions you could kind of see them popping up into just to create that bit of chaos, I think could be really, really exciting for Spurs. It's not always the case of like chuck all your best players in the team and hope it works out, but that is a mouth-watering prospect when you've got someone.
And these are hard-working players and they're intelligent players.
They're going to do the graft defensively, like especially on this side,
definitely.
Kulusevski and Kudus, for sure. So let's talk about then. Let's go back to the Super Cup, right, and think about the back five that we saw. We haven't seen Spurs start another game like that yet, but we have seen us go to it in games to kind of hold on to leads and protect leads. If you look at Spurs' games coming up, we've obviously got a lot of tough games in November. We've got PSG away in the Parc des Princes. We've got Arsenal away at the Emirates. We've got Man United at home, which is obviously a game I think where we should be looking to 100% dominate the ball. Chelsea will be an interesting one because I think it will be you'll see a bit of both at times because of the quality that they've got and the kind of confidence they're playing with at the moment, and some of the players, they might have come back by the time that game rolls around. But Seb, what are your kind of thoughts on, like, if you're looking ahead to Arsenal and PSG, for example, how are you thinking about those kind of games and how we should approach that kind of fixture?
I really don't mind it as an option. I think you saw how effective it can be in the Super Cup. I think it's going to be really interesting to see whether he goes with the sort of back five or whether he goes with the back four with the sort of 10 being either Sarr or Bergvall with a sort of really structured and disciplined midfield ahead of a back four, or whether he throws Danso in there. I think I would prefer the back four with the sort of more defensive-minded midfield. I think with Sarr in the 10 there, I think my probably dream setup for those games would be Sarr in the 10 with Bergvall and Paulinho in the pivot, and then you've got Simmons on the left, Kudus on the right, and Richarlison or Solanke up front, ideally, in those games. I do like the back three. I think the back three could limit us in terms of what midfield we could play, and I think I really like Sarr in these sort of games for his ball carrying, his threat on the transition. Like, you saw how good he was against Arsenal in pre-season. You've seen how good he is in big games just generally, and I think that I don't think you need a back three to become a lot more sort of solid in these games. And I like the back four option. I think, Paulinho and Bergvall in there as sort of protection, but Bergvall still is a player who's able to still give us that guy who can sort of relieve pressure on us and carry the ball. Sarr there as well. Obviously, Xavi Simons and Kudus, massive ball carrying threats. I think, whether you choose to play a Jed Spence in that kind of game over a Destiny Udogie just for that sort of, or even over a Pedro Porro for that one-on-one defensive ability.
I was going to say, if you're thinking about, say, specifically for Arsenal, right, you're going away there, you've got Saka on that right-hand side.
You don't need a back three against Gyökeres, that's for sure.
No,
that is true.
I think you want Spence against Saka for sure. I think what the major issue I have with this team right now is that Richarlison is not a kind of player
he's not the guy.
That's the only thing I would say about what Seb was saying in terms of I think Sarr being as that most advanced midfielder gives Richarlison a lot more leeway in terms of his hold-up play, because I think it's a lot. Richarlison he's not clean, it's very scrappy, but I think when you've got someone that is so excellent at hoovering up the second balls, Richarlison can again, you don't want Richarlison occupying.
I also think sometimes Sarr's brought back kind of on transitions and at times you need to escape pressure by going long, and Sarr might not be kind of up to it yet to get there to move up. So I think it depends on kind of how the game unfolds, but you just want someone that's going to make it stick. And that side
with Dominic Solanke in it, this is the exact kind of game where you have Dominic Solanke and you have him at his best, because sort of when he's pinning defenders, he'll relish that physical challenge, whether it's a Gabriel or a Saliba or a Pacho or a Marquinhos at PSG. He'll relish that battle, and I genuinely think Solanke, goals against Chelsea last year. He can rise to the occasion as well, and sort of those big games, I do think he enjoys that battle and that responsibility that he's got up front to sort of fight for everything. And like you said about Kudus in our last video, Kish, turning 70-30s into 50-50s, I think Dominic Solanke does that just as well. I think he turned the way he wins duels and the way that he'll bring Kudus and Simmons into the game, allow players like Sarr to run past him. I just think once you've got him back fully fit, these are the sort of games where I think you see him really excel and become Thomas Frank's main man. I think, like you said, Kolo Muani can also do that too. Plus, he gives you that sort of maybe more threat in behind, that sort of more pace going the other way. And if Kudus is carrying the ball, if Simmons is carrying the ball, you've got Kolo Muani as an option maybe off the last shoulder, and I think he's somebody who can stretch but also hold up play too. I think that those two are definitely options that come in. I think with Kolo Muani back fit now, and I think we're going to see him properly involved after the international break, I do think that he'll definitely be in Thomas Frank's mind for those sort of games. I don't think Tell's the kind of option I don't think he's really an option these games up front at all. I think he'll get lost in those sort of games. So
the one other thing I'd say is you want Kudus in more central areas in games like this, because you want him in those transitions. You want him probably running in behind a little bit as well, whilst the length is short. And you kind of in games against lower position, you want him to stretch play. In these games, you want him touching the ball constantly in transitional moments and carrying it through central areas and being dangerous in that way.
Yeah, 100%. If we could have two Mohamed Kuduses, that would be so ideal.
I think it's interesting what you said, Kish, about kind of Kudus centrally, because you saw the impact that he had in the Super Cup, where he was kind of playing up front in a two with Richarlison, and his ability to be that backboard and kind of be that springboard. Because in games like this, you can kind of have Kudus kind of defending the more central areas. Like this is kind of us out of possession. Sarr can kind of help Porro from a wider point of view. You can have Kudus in here. So when Spurs do want to go a bit longer to kind of get out and relieve pressure, Kudus is in there kind of winning the second ones, and also it allows Solanke to drop back in and Kudus kind of be that main backboard and kind of springboard as well. So, and then Solanke can kind of drop deeper. Kudus can kind of make those runs in behind as well. We've kind of seen the benefits as well of teams having a bit of luck against Arsenal, like Man City, where they can kind of play quickly through the midfield out because Arsenal kind of pressed up so high and exploit the space with the runners like Haaland. You saw Reinders kind of the importance of carrying the ball forward in those kind of games as well. So in terms of, do you think that, how often do you kind of think we'll see that back five? If I kind of go back to that again, do you think we will? Thomas Frank, I think, kind of did describe PSG as like a special operation, didn't he?
Yeah.
It was like the operation, what was it? Operation succeeded, but the patient died. Those were his kind of words. But do you think it was something that we might return to against PSG in the Champions League? I think we're less likely to do it against Arsenal, but what about PSG?
I can say what I think why is because Dembele drops so deep and it allows one of the centre-backs to just follow him, and then you still have a settled back four. And then also the other thing is, so Dembele obviously drops into midfield, but it allows Romero to follow him. And then you obviously got back four still there. I think the other thing is that they've got two 1v1 menaces, like their two 1v1 wingers are a joke, and so having two outside centre backs to once the winger maybe gets past a Porro or a Spence, there's a centre back there to clean up or double up. I think that those are for me the two reasons that jump out at me of why we played that 3-back, and I don't think it will be a common occurrence. Also because our centre back depth, while down the line it's going to be good, I think at the moment we've only really got Danso, Van der Ven, Romero. So it's not something you want to really test that often because you only got 3 players who can do it.
Okay, all right. Finally, on the back 5 thing then, before we kind of move on to how we can improve Tottenham's best 11 in the transfer market, one thing that we obviously, we haven't seen Luka Vuskovic play for Spurs in any sort of meaningful game yet. How big of a part do you think he can have in these games if Spurs do decide to go to a back 3 with his aerial ability?
Huge. I think you'll probably... I'd have him central
and Romero. Vuskovic centre, totally.
I mean, I think, if Vuskovic was still at Spurs this season, you might have seen this potentially trialled in some games, maybe a bit more. I'm not sure it would have been this season, but moving forwards, I mean, you've got 3 centre-halves there who will hopefully all be at Spurs for the long term, who can all contribute in massive ways. And I do think once you've got Vuskovic fully up to speed and sort of really knock you on the door of that first team, that would be a lot more tempting to Thomas Frank to potentially use this system a little bit more often and maybe have somebody like Romero given a bit more of a free role to sort of step up, like Kish said, in lots of games. But yeah, I think it's difficult to switch constantly between a back 5 and a back 4, which is why I think Frank said this is kind of a specialist operation. I do think you can sort of have the same benefits that you would normally see in a back 5 in a back 4 with a changed midfield setup and the way that Frank sets us up in that system. But I mean, for the future, with Vuskovic in there, Van der Ven, Romero, you're having 3 world-class centre-halves in there, in my opinion, once Vuskovic hits his peak, etc. So that's a scary prospect for us, 100%.
For sure. I think one final quick tweak what we could potentially see if Spurs do set up in a back 5, because I think we've really got the profiles to do it, is set up maybe more in the kind of back 5 mould of a Crystal Palace or a Man United, where you kind of have these 2 number 10s behind the striker. Because I think when you've got Kulusevski coming back, if you were to maybe take Spence out, I think Spence is definitely big for these kind of games where you might think that we might need to play in a more defensive side, but you can kind of be a bit more progressive with that back 3, and you've got Van der Ven to kind of defend those channels. When you've got Kudus, who is so comfortable operating centrally, who can make the runs in behind a striker.
You can't play that pivot, though. That's the only thing.
No, I think you definitely need to get... I think Paulinho should stay, but I think that's where you need a Bergvall in there just to kind of help get the ball out and get the ball to these kind of players. Definitely. I think Simmons is an inside sort of number 10 in that system. Or as well, I don't ever want to take Kudus out of a Spurs team right now, but it's also such a... I think that's such an effective way you can use Kulusevski. As well, 100%. As kind of an inside player in that sort of system.
Yeah, like Kudus was injured
It's interesting that we've taken Bentancur out of pretty much every side that we've looked at so far.
Yeah, I was going to say that's kind of the main thing.
Pairings. Yeah,
I think you weigh up between Paulinho and Bentancur, which 100%. One you choose, and Paulinho brings a more elite level of ball winning, where Bentancur is kind of more rounded, but not an expert in anything.
Yeah.
Okay. On that note, then, if we go back to finish off the video, if we go back to the starting lineup that played against Leeds at the weekend, if you could make 2 upgrades each in the, I feel like you'll probably have similar picks anyway for the positions, but let me know, Seb, and then Kish, 2 kind of areas where you're looking at really, or maybe 3 if there's one more as well, to kind of really upgrade to take the best version of Tottenham to the kind of next level. If we chuck maybe some of the other guys back in here as well, like a Kulusevski and Maddison kind of into this thinking as well. But if we're doing it off of the basis of the way we set up at the weekend, how could Tottenham improve this current first 11?
I think the first way is definitely with a deep line progressive passer, somebody who is sort of pass first in that midfield. I think Kish is somebody who can speak about that better than I can, but I think my main thing is sort of having... Obviously, Simmons will be able to play and will play a lot of football on that left-hand side once I think Kulusevski is back and once Maddison is back as well. But having a different option on that left-hand side too, in terms of a winger who can consistently take on their fullback 1v1, hold the width, whether Odebear becomes that or whether Tell becomes that, I think Tell won't become that sort of player, but whether either of them sort of step up in a big way this season is going to be very interesting. But I think for sure that deep line passer is the most important part of the team. I think a striker could be looked at come the start of next season as well. If Kolo Muani is not that guy for us, if Dominic Solanke and Richarlison still can't go over these injury issues or really up their level. So I think striker, DM, but a passer, and potentially a left winger are the areas that I'd look to upgrade. But I think that once all of our players come back from injury, that squad is looking so strong anyway. So yes, yeah, a great shot. A goalkeeper as well. I'd love to see Kinski either get a go, or if that's not going to happen, maybe an upgrade on Vicario next summer. But yeah, I think Kish, you'll be better to talk about the deep line passing and why that's so important.
I think having such talent in the kind of attacking roles, you want someone who's able to supply them constantly. And there has been games where I haven't seen Simmons and Kudus get enough of the ball for what they can bring. We're kind of just pinging the ball to Kudus, and obviously he's doing what he can with it. Yeah. But if you get him the ball more often in more advanced areas in cleaner ways, then you're going to be reaping the rewards of that. I think left winger, I think it's just one to review in the summer. I think 100%. I think it's likely that we go in for a marquee left winger.
And who would that be for you if you could pick anybody on the market right now?
Semenyo is definitely a great option.
And how do you think he complements the existing players kind of already in that front line?
I think his both-footedness really makes him more flexible than most. And I think he's someone that can hold width but can also drift in field. I know he's played as a 9 at times. He's played on the right. He's played on the left. He's someone who is plug and play, I guess. Like, you don't really have to worry about the setup. Like I said, there's some players that really need the right dynamics around them, and there's some players who you can just plug into any team and they make a difference. I think Semenyo is one of those. Similar to Kudus, really. I think he's just someone that would massively up our level. There's other wingers that I can't think of right now, but there's a few that I'd consider. But I think Semenyo is the most likely to hit the ground running. And then goalkeeper, I think just someone who's better with their feet. That would be, whether it's Kinski can push on, or if it's we sign someone. Now this is long term, obviously. I think Vicario is serviceable for now, but I don't see him pushing on with the ball at his feet, and I think that's so important nowadays.
Yeah, I agree with that. The options that you said, Seb, if we were able to add, I did just chuck Adam Wharton as the name in there for that progressive pass.
That's the profile, isn't it?
You're unlocking the keys to absolutely everything there, isn't it? But him or an equivalent kind of profile, you bring in an upgrade up front and you bring in a Kudus level equivalent on that left-hand side to kind of match his quality. Then with Maddison and Kulusevski as options as well. Solanke is kind of the backup striker. If we were to sign a big-name striker in the summer, potentially Tell, Odebear, Vuskovic to come into it, Bergval, Sarr as well as options. That is a pretty exciting squad.
Title charge, treble next season, potentially. I think we're looking at there. So
I'd say so.
That's realistic.
I'd say quadruple, probably.
And then down the line, we've got even like Luca Williams-Barnett coming through. Vuskovic will obviously be a major part. Byfield. There's so much talent.
Then we'll start talking about the sextuple, I reckon, after that.
Where's that? Anyway, thank you guys very much for joining me. Make sure to go and subscribe to Seb, subscribe to Kish. This will be a collaboration video, so it's much easier for you guys to go and click and find their channels in the link below. So make sure to go and show them some support. And we will be back doing more stuff after the international break. So enjoy the rest, and hopefully enjoyed this video. Nice one. Up Spurs.
Adios.